Hello, I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. How'd you like that? So, oh my gosh, I have been on a whirlwind of a journey today. Do you ever learn things and all of a sudden you're like, what? Like your mind's kind of going, that's where I'm at right now. I feel like I've just returned from a Costa Rican ayahuasca journey. It's just crazy. Okay, let me back up to 1990s in Arizona. I worked at, as a lot of you know, I worked at the Red Lobster as a waitress. And the back of the house basically didn't speak English. They were all pretty much, mostly for the most part, Mexican. And like really hardworking, very sweet, kind group of people that we all got along. We were friends. It was great. We'd go out together to Applebee's after work. And I had many a argument with my uncle, rest in peace, about undocumented workers. And I was like, look, at the restaurant, it couldn't stay open without these people. Like, nobody wants some of the work they're doing. And his argument was that it takes it away from American workers and they should be documented. And I have to agree, yeah, they should be documented. Like, I'm not sure why they're not. And maybe they were. I mean, I'm not saying Red Lobster was, I don't know. I don't know. But I kind of had the feeling maybe they weren't, but I don't know. But anyway, so that led me down this journey today where I was like, well, why is it that, you see the pictures of ICE arresting people, and in the comments, people are like, well, if they were documented, they wouldn't be arrested. Illegal is the main thing, all this stuff. And so I was just like, well, all right, so what's going on? Obviously, if it were simple to be documented, you'd probably be documented. You know what I mean? So I just started a little search, and it became a, like I said, just like crazy. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit, mostly my research has been about why aren't restaurant back of the house people oftentimes, why aren't they documented sometimes? And other, like the meat packing plants and things like that. And I think I've actually figured it out a little bit. But I'm not going to talk about every form of visas or green cards or, because it's a lot. The immigration in the U.S. is complicated and there is a lot to it. And I've only learned about it today for about an hour. But I have really tried to take in as much information as I can to be able to share with you. And I will touch on the eating the dogs, eating the cats situation too. Just because I looked it up, I was like, what was that all about, by the way? So, like I said, I'm no expert. But I hope that you'll find it interesting and relaxing, first of all. And that if you're curious, you will go and research it beyond what I'm going to tell you today. Okay, does that make sense? So don't get mad at me. Although I appreciate everybody's comments. But people who think I'm an expert or that I'm trying to, I don't know, do something evil, I'm not. I'm just, okay. So what I learned, and I thought this was super interesting, so that's why I'm like, I have to tell you guys, it's so interesting. Okay, there are basically these two types of visas. It's an H2A and an H2B. Okay, the H-2A visa. We should write visa, I guess. And that's not like the credit card visa. These are things for immigration. The H-2A visa is only for agriculture. I'm not going to be able to fit this. Oh no, agriculture. Okay. And that is for like agricultural labor. So you're talking about farm workers, harvesters, people dealing with like livestock workers. That's agriculture. Okay, and then you have the H-2B visa. And this is temporary, non-agriculture. We'll just write 8G for agriculture. So non-agriculture temporary. So that would be like your seasonal, intermittent, peak load kind of one-time jobs, like a landscaping project or hotel and housekeeping during like tourist seasons. So like a ski season or like, like what I'm saying, or like a construction project where they need extra employees. So these are the two types of visas. Now, a restaurant and this is wild to me, they do not qualify for a temporary visa because it's a permanent job. Did I spell restaurant wrong? Yeah, I don't know how to spell restaurant. Just ignore that. I said E. I don't know. They don't qualify for any kind of temporary visas. And they don't qualify for agriculture visas. So the line cooks, the dishwashers, the prep cooks, they wouldn't be considered temporary unless it's in a place where they have like a sudden influx, like a ski lodge. But for like a restaurant that's there year round, they don't qualify for the temporary visas. Wild, right? So there's no real visa for restaurants. This is bugging me. How do you spell restaurant? Is there nothing here? I don't know. Anyway. Okay. So going back to these, the way that it works, the way that you get a visa if you are a person who wants to work in the United States, the first thing that has to happen is the employer. So let's say there's a farm in Kansas. I don't know why I picked Kansas. And they need to, plant and do all the reap. I don't know. What do you do on a farm? Plant and you reap. You deal with your corn. Okay. So they need to petition. The first thing they'll have to do, I don't know why I wrote that. Okay. The first thing they'll have to do is petition. They petition the United States Citizen and Immigration Service, also known as USCIS. Okay, so they petition them months in advance to allow them to to request the workers. That's the word I'm looking for. So with a H-2A visa, they need to petition them and certify that there aren't enough U.S. workers able to do the job, or able, willing, and qualified and available to do their agricultural work. So that's the first thing they have to do is petition. Now, if it's for the temporary, they have to certify that hiring foreign workers will not adversely affect the wages and the working, the workers for the U.S. Like they both have to say these aren't going to take jobs away from U.S. workers, and I can't find enough U.S. workers. That's the first thing they have to do. Um, and then I'm trying to think. Okay. And then they have to get labor certification. I'm trying to remember exactly how this works. So the employer has to get approved. Then, after getting the USCIS to approve it by the Department of Labor, I guess that's the part of. Okay, so they're having to prove that there are no qualified workers available, and that's with the Department of Labor. Okay, so they've gone through two kind of things here. And then once they've been approved, now they have to tell the employee to go through the visa process. All right, so these are both employer. And then your employer, sorry, this is sloppy. And then the employee does this part. And the worker applies through the U.S. consulate or the embassy to get their visa. Okay, so that's what has to be done. So first, the employer has to petition the USCIS, and then they have to prove that there are no U.S. workers who will be adversely affected and that they can't find them, and they can't find them. And then once they get approved for that, then the visa process starts with the employee. Okay, now that is for these two things. But there is nothing for a restaurant. I gotta get rid of that because it's bothering. For a restaurant to apply because they aren't temporary and they aren't agriculture. What? That's wild, right? Okay. Now with the H-2A visa, there is no cap on how many can be given out in a year. In 2024, I think I read they gave out just over 315,000 visas for agriculture. The H-2B visas, which are temporary non-agriculture, they do have a cap of 66,000. And that's 33,000 in the first half of the year and 33,000 in the second half of the year. This is a federal cap. This has no cap. But the problem is there's still a lot of paperwork and bureaucracy that has to go on to get through all three of these steps. So you've got to start months in advance going through this and this. And then the visa process takes time. So each one of these steps takes a lot of time. And so sometimes it comes down to their time is of the essence because we've got to plant crops. And I'm not saying it's all farm. This could be anything. Okay? Whatever your situation. But they might say to the employee, you need to come or we're going to find somebody else. And so there's some pressure put on the employees to get in that job before it's possibly taken away, right? One of the things that they do require is that the employer has to prove that they can offer a fair wage, housing, and have transportation. And they have to, of course, prove they can't find U.S. workers. So that's part of what they're proving. I don't know. Isn't your mind blown already? I'm sure everybody else already knew this. I was just like, I haven't really given much thought to it. So the question is, why are so many people remaining undocumented? And it seems to me that a lot of it is there's a high demand, and it's just a slow process to get it through the applications and all the bureaucracy and all the government stuff we all know about how that can be. So if a farm needs people quickly, some might arrive without going through the whole program yet. There are some eligibility restrictions that, like, not all foreign workers can qualify. Some countries have agreements with the US, so they have to meet like these security agreements, and then the workers have to go through health checks. So there's that. But these the agriculture visas are usually only last less than a year. So sometimes they have overstay issues where, they're still getting paid but their visa has lapsed, but the next season came in, or the work still needed help. So that's part of that too. And then you have tourists and students who overstay their visas. That's kind of a separate issue. Okay, the other thing that I was thinking about, and I was looking up because where I lived in Phoenix, this wouldn't happen so much in Phoenix, but it definitely happened like further south towards the Mexican border. And I know it happens in Texas as well. I watched a Padma Lakshmi, I forgot what her show was called, but she did a show on this, about these day workers who cross the border from Mexico into the United States. And they work like kind of right along the border. And so I was looking up, like, what kind of visas do they have? Is there a day work visa? Well, there is not. There is not. So they call them cross-border workers. And they're technically illegal. But a lot of times they're very necessary. And so the Border Patrol knows who they are and that they come back and forth, so they're allowed. But the problem with that is because they don't have a visa, oftentimes they can't, they don't, unless they don't pay taxes and they don't pay Social Security. But that also means there are no protections for these people and no benefits. It leaves people vulnerable. So it's not the greatest situation for really anybody involved. So there's been talk about, could you do a day work visa or expand one of these to include day workers? But the paperwork, like they can't keep up with the paperwork already. Now, other than restaurants, another interesting one is meatpacking. I was looking that up because I know I saw some of the meatpacking plants were being sort of targeted. As an easy hit for ICE right now, I think. And the reason why meatpacking plants have quite a few non-documented is because they are not considered agriculture, which is kind of interesting because you kind of think maybe they should be because it would be livestock, but it's not. It's different. So it's not classified under agriculture. But it also can't really be an H-2B visa because they aren't temporary. If you get a plant at a meat packing plant, it isn't looked on as temporary work. It could be full-time year-round work. Now, there's a caveat, like if it's Thanksgiving or Christmas and they're going to have to pack a bunch of turkeys or hams or something, then maybe they can get a pass and be able to get people in for that. But as a daily grind, they can't qualify for either of these two types of visas. Generally what ICE will do is send an I-9 audit to an employer, and then they have to produce documentation for all employees who are authorized to work. And that's how they know whether they have documented employees or not. That's generally how it works. And they can, here's a weird thing too, they can pursue criminal charges against the employer, but that rarely happens. So like everything, right? Like the employers, and some of them are big time employers, and they employ a lot of people, and they know they're employing undocumented employees who could get arrested and sent off to prisons anywhere. But the people who hired them, a lot of times, they might get a fine or some kind of a lawsuit against them and charged with something, but they aren't generally going to get the brunt of the, punishment. So that's something kind of interesting. I was like, oh yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, I don't know. Oh, and then I was trying to find out like about nannies. A nanny usually comes on a different kind of visa. It's called a B1 visa. And that is for foreign nationals to come temporarily to the US as a domestic employee. So, like a personal chef or a nanny, and they have to be short term. So, that's for domestic. Like I said, though, there's so many, like, I don't even know. There's so many things. Domestic employee. And it has to be short term. But really, most domestic employees, I think, are undocumented because it's a whole lot of paperwork for an individual to do. So I think there is a lot of undocumented stuff like that, I think. And then there are green cards, which I never really knew what that meant, but they call it a green card because the card used to be a card that was green. My brain is not remembering what the official name is right now. If I even ever knew, I don't know if I looked that up, but a green card is more for like if you have a family member who you want to sponsor. So like a relative of, you're a US citizen and you have a cousin or something who lives in Italy, you can sponsor them to become a US citizen. But it has a long waiting list, like 12 or more years. And each family can only have so many people they sponsor. So if you have a big family, you might not be able to do it. And each country can only have 7% of the people who come over. So like if it's a war-torn country and a lot of people are trying to get their people out, once you hit 7%, that's the cap per country. Or like, because like Mexico's so close to us, maybe a lot of people want to get their loved ones in from Mexico, but it's 7% is the cap. And that is for family sponsorship, okay. That's one way to get a green card. But like I said, the wait on that is long. Okay, and then there is an employment-based sponsorship for a green card. You know what else we should do? Is that test they give people when they become U.S. citizens. I should go over that one time. I had a friend who became a citizen from Russia, and that test is hard. As I recall, I mean, I was 20-something when she took it, but I remember going, whoa, I don't know all this stuff. All right. So you can get a green card that's employment-based. So an employer can sponsor foreign workers, but they're like strict requirements that the job must be really specialized and permanent, and you have no U.S. workers who could qualify and do that job. So it's really, you have to, there's a lot of proof that needs to be done to get an employment-based green card. And then there's some other categories like refugees, asylum seekers, investors. I don't know. There was a lot more here that I was like, I don't know what. Okay. And then there are student visas, the F1 visas. I guess I should write that on a separate card. And there are a lot of these kind of things that I don't know how many there are in the world. I don't even know. But I looked up just student visa. That's for like academic study. So you can be in the country for the however long the program is, plus 60 days. So that's your students. And I forgot to look up, I know like some universities had their Chinese students sent back or told them not to come. So I don't know what the deal. I forgot to look that up. There is something there. I don't know, but I assume they had visas. They just decided to cancel them or something. I don't know. So if you're a student on an F1 visa, you can work 20 hours a week on campus, or you can do some off-campus work, but it must be in a field of study. So you're not taking jobs from people who, could have those jobs, I guess, although on campus, maybe you could. I don't know. But it has to be basically on campus or a field of study. So if you're like going to be a doctor, you can work at the hospital as whatever. Anyway, all right. So that, I know I was talking a little fast during that, but I just got kind of like fascinated by it. I was like, I've never even looked this up. How is that possible? It's so interesting. Oh, so I told you I'd talk about so most of you probably remember there was I think it was Springfield, Ohio, where these, I believe they were fake videos of people barbecuing animals, whatever. And so Trump and I think it was Vance jumped on that, and they were saying they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. You guys all remember this stuff. Okay, so those immigrants, or what do we, I don't know what the correct word is. I don't know the correct language, but those people were here on what is called a TPS. Oh, shoot, my pen's dying. Hold on. Try this one. Which is temporary protected status. And that was because they came here from Haiti, and there was a lot of danger in Haiti at the time. So these families were allowed to come here on temporary protected status. That's a humanitarian program that allows individuals in like armed conflict areas or areas that are having environmental disaster to come to the U.S. as a humanitarian thing. So they became eligible for TPS, and that's it. I don't know what else to say about that. I was looking up, how the people in Ohio feel about that, and the governor of Ohio said, yeah, we had them here. We invited them here. We're not feeling that they're a problem. The city of Springfield has had high crime for many years, and the Haitian people move there, and the crime is still high, but it hasn't increased in an equal amount to how many people moved there. So there's no saying it has anything to do with these families who've moved there. So I don't know. You can definitely read online for and against these people, whether they're criminals or whether they're just people. I don't know. But that's what they were here on, is TPS. I should write down, I guess that's temporary protected status. And as far as I know, I think all those families are still here. Temporary protected status. Okay. So that's not really like a visa. It's more of an emergency humanitarian aid kind of thing. Okay. Did I forget anything? I'm sure I did. There was just so much, I guess. Oh, I know what else I looked up was cruise ships, because, I cruise, and they always have staff from all different countries. And because they're in international waters, they can be, if they have like an American, I don't know, owner or port, or they can be on what's called I think it was a C1D visa, something like this. And that allows them to have entry into the U.S. while they're working on the ship. If they go into like a port in the U.S., they can have entry into the U.S. and they can work on the ship, no problem, international waters. So that's kind of cruise ship. And think they just have special because they're in international waters. Yeah. So there you go. So what do we do about the fact that these restaurant employees, the restaurants themselves, they can't apply for any of these visas? What? How does that work? And I didn't see that there's anything being done about that that I could find. I was like, I mean, this has happened since I worked in restaurants when I was 20, like 4. So that would have been 30 years ago, and nothing's changed. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. Interesting. All right, well, I guess that's all I have, but I don't know. It was just the funniest thing that I have thought about the back of the house employees so many times, but I never bothered to look it up. And I can't tell you how much we all need to bother to look things up. Because then you go, oh my God, that's so interesting. Every time I look stuff up, I start to go, well, I learn something new every day. Anyway, I hope you found that as interesting as I did. I don't know. So I think our main things here are the H-2A visa, which is agriculture, and the H-2B visa, which is temporary non-agriculture. That's how most people are getting their visas. The temporary non-agriculture has a yearly cap of 66,000 visas given out. The H-2A, or agriculture, does not have a cap except for just whether or not the people doing the paperwork can keep up with the applications. Because like I said, in 2024, there were 300 and I think it was like 15,000 something. But it was a lot. That's a lot of paperwork. So, yeah, that's what makes that difficult. F1 visas are for students. Whoops. And then green cards, you need to have family sponsor you, or you can get an employment-based green card. But each country can't go over 7% of the amount of people coming in, if that makes sense. It's kind of confusing, I guess, a little, isn't it? Okay, and then you have TPS, which is temporary protected status, which is a humanitarian situation. You have I think it's C1D visas, but now I'm not sure. And that's for cruise ship employees. They're kind of special because they're out there in international waters. And then there's a B1 visa, which are for domestic employees like nannies and housekeepers and stuff. So these are for like farm workers, and these are for like hotels that have seasonal, like ski lodges, or I assume like somewhere like I was going to say Disney World, but do they have a season? I guess they do. I would assume something like that. They're non-agriculture, but temporary. They have to be very temporary. Like I say, I need these employees for 4 months during the summer because that's when we get our rush. That's what that's for. So for these two, the H-2A and the H-2B, first the employer has to petition to the United States Citizens and Immigration Services. I think that's right. And then they have to prove to the Department of Labor that they aren't taking American jobs and that they can pay them a fair wage and everything. Make sure they're going to be treated properly. And they have to prove that. Yeah, I guess that's pretty much everything, right? And then it goes to the employee to actually get the visa processed. And then it goes to the government to fill out the paperwork. Really, I should put that on there too. Okay. So, there you go. A little bit about our immigration system. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I didn't mess it up too much. I tried. Alright, guys, I will talk to you soon. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. No cap. Labor certification, Department of Labor. International waters, B1 visas, domestic employee, short term, 7% each country. TPS, F1 visas, students, only agriculture, temporary protected status, temporary non-agriculture, H2A visas, visa process, employee